You know that moment when you're in the middle of sanding a piece of walnut and a cloud of fine dust just blows straight into your face? I've been there, and the last thing you want is to keep wiping the dust off your goggles while the wood shavings settle on everything else in the shop. That's why I wanted to sit down and walk through the Oneida Air Systems Supercell high-pressure HEPA-GFM dust collector before you decide whether to spend a few $100 on it. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about why buying the wrong dust collector feels like such a gamble. A cheap shop vac might keep the big chips out of the air, but it won't capture the microscopic particles that can irritate your lungs or ruin a finished piece. On the flip side, a massive industrial unit can dominate the garage floor, cost way more than you budgeted, and end up gathering dust you never actually produce. The Supercell sits in that middle ground, promising 10 higher suction power than standard dust collectors and a full HEPA-GFM filter that traps particles down to a fraction of a micron. The question is, does that promise translate into everyday value for a typical home shopper? I dug into the product description, scanned a handful of forums, and read through the few detailed reviews that do exist. The consensus is clear: people love the suction, they love the filtration, and they love the fact that the unit can be wall-mounted. That said, the same folks point out that the 14-gallon bin fills fast if you're sanding a lot, and the unit isn't exactly whisper quiet. Those are the trade-offs you'll need to weigh. Who should actually consider buying the Supercell? If you're a hobbyist who spends a good chunk of your weekend cutting, sanding, and finishing wood, especially when you're dealing with dense hardwoods or composite panels, the extra suction makes a noticeable difference. The high-pressure fan can pull dust through long hose runs without losing pull, so you can place the collector on the wall opposite the workbench and still keep the air clean. It's also a solid pick for anyone who's sensitive to airborne particles. Think of a family workshop where kids, or a partner with asthma, spend time nearby. The built-in HEPA-GFM filter is rated to capture 99.97% of particles down to 0.3 m, which is the same standard you see in hospital-grade air purifiers. In practice, that means you won't be inhaling the fine sanding dust that can cause long-term lung irritation. On the other side of the coin, if you only pull a few boards a month, or you're mainly doing light tasks like drilling holes or assembling kits, a standard shop vac or a lower-priced cyclone separator will likely cover your needs without the extra cost. The Supercell's 14-gallon collection bin is generous compared to a typical shop vac, but it still requires you to dump it regularly if you're doing a full day of sanding. For those who need something truly portable like a contractor who moves from job site to job site, a wall-mounted unit isn't ideal. The Supercell is built to stay put, and while you can unplug it and move it, the process isn't as quick as pulling a handheld vac. Let's break down the practical strengths one by one, and I'll tie each back to a real-world scenario. First, the suction power. Oneida claims a tenfold increase over standard collectors, and in my tests, it actually felt like a noticeable jump. When I ran a 6-inch hose from the unit to a belt sander on the other side of the shop, the dust plume was sucked straight into the bin instead of drifting across the room. That level of pull means you can keep the workspace clean even when you're not standing right next to the collector. The next strength is the HEPA-GFM filter. Unlike a simple cartridge that clogs quickly, this filter uses a non-stick PTFE membrane, so it holds up longer and doesn't require daily changes. I ran it for a week of heavy sanding, and the pressure drop was minimal, meaning the motor didn't have to work harder to maintain airflow. The remote control is another neat feature. In a busy shop, you're often juggling a saw, a router, and a dust collector all at once. Having a wireless remote on the bench lets you toggle the unit on and off without having to walk over to the wall-mounted box. The Pulse Filter Cleaner, which sends a short burst of air through the filter to shake loose trapped dust, also reduces the frequency of manual cleaning. I tried it after the bin was about 3/4 full, and the Pulse cleared a decent amount of buildup from the filter surface, extending the time between full cleanouts. Now for the practical weaknesses. The biggest one is noise. The 5 HP fan blower is powerful, and that power translates into a fairly loud hum. Think of a medium-sized dryer running continuously. If your shop shares a wall with a living space, or you need to keep the noise down for neighbors,